This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for downloading the latest edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John McAroon. My guy's back. After sailing away into the ocean, having a good old time, my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski, is back, ready to recap a nice week off, celebrating some time with the family, but a lot of shit happened in the world of Detroit sports, the Super Bowl, some unfortunate things going on in the world. We got to break it all down as we near episode 500. Thank you guys so much for your support going down memory lane as of late. It's been great to kind of go back and listen to old podcasts, recap some of the old topics that we've talked about. So it's great. It's a good time to catch up with my guy who had a week off. What was it like? Let's start on a positive note. I know it wasn't exactly perfect, but set the scene. What was it like? Where'd you go? Did you come back healthy?
I don't know if I came back healthy. I think I'm dealing with a bit of a cold. I got a bit of a cough, and Alyssa's got what sounds like it might be a sinus infection. So the fingers are crossed that it is not the vid, but we'll see. I don't feel like I have anything else. I just have this weird, like, scratchy throat, and she just has a little bit of sinus pressure. So we'll see what happens there. So it's that post-cruise, I don't know, sickness, illness, gross feeling, not really sure. It could also be just a change of schedule. I went from basically sleeping in every day, sleeping until like 10 o'clock to now getting back up at 4 in the morning. So, that's a bit of a rough start. But it was, the deal, because you and I had this conversation. You gave me some good advice. I didn't want to go. I was pretty annoyed that I was put in the situation I was put in where I had to make a decision to go, especially after talking to my mother and telling her, don't do this to me, and she proceeded to go ahead and do it to me. I'm not sure if any of you out there have a mother who's a habitual line stepper and does not respect your boundaries, but that's what I've got. So if you do, then you understand the pain of having to deal with your parents. What I realized is I don't necessarily enjoy vacationing with my family, specifically my mother and my sister. The first 2 days were rough for me. Maybe the first 3 days were rough for me. It was just more a mental thing because I really didn't want to be there. Once I got over that, it was a little bit more enjoyable, and me and the girlfriend made the best out of a situation. We'll say, I don't necessarily know how tough it is. You're on a freaking boat and you're sailing around and you get to go to cool little islands, but we made the best out of a situation. And I guess her and I had a pretty good time just kind of hanging out with each other and checking out the different shows. They had a piano guy who was absolutely fantastic. We checked him out every night. They had some really good comedians. They were fantastic. So the entertainment aspect of it was really, really good. But again, it was not ideal, and we'll just kind of leave it at that.
Gotcha. Okay. And I know it's tough, too, because you're around a lot of people. It's crazy. That's the part of life now that I'm at, is that I don't take a lot of vacations, but I'm going to start because you're going so hard for the last 4 or 5 years, and you realize, okay, you don't need to be going that hard, and you realize here's the best part is, like, I want to do a vacation with no people around. Like, I want to actually be like Aaron Rodgers. I don't want to be in the dark, but I want to go somewhere where it's me, my wife, and 2 kids and nobody else. Like, in the woods.
If I could recommend anything for you, look into going to Georgia and look at going into the mountains in Georgia.
Okay.
Get an Airbnb, go to the mountains. The serenity of being just out in the woods and being surrounded by nature and the beauty of all of it. And there's different things you can go around and check out. There's a ton to do, and you're not necessarily inundated with people. It was one of my more enjoyable vacations that the girlfriend had me go on. I'm very similar to you. I don't necessarily like taking vacations. I like to work. Let's go do work. That's what we show up. That's what we do. That's why we've been able to do this for almost 500 episodes. We show up, we do work every week. I don't necessarily like going on vacations. You will always hear me basically tell you a story, and it starts with, I was forced to go on vacation. I don't necessarily always want to go, So same as you want the serenity. You don't want the people. Look at going into the mountains in Georgia, having a relaxing time.
That's what appealed to me when we drove through Tennessee on my way to South Carolina at the last time I took time off. So that might be something to do. Yes, be away, get off the grid for a little bit. Not doing the darkness thing. I don't know how Aaron Rodgers is going to keep saying he's going to be doing a bunch of mental yoga, mental exercises, but I do want some amenities. I just don't want the people around. And it's just crazy because you said it. That's the part that stinks is you're on a cruise, you're trapped with all these people, and you just kind of know that potentially I could come back with a germ or a virus or some weird shit could go down. So it is something to look at in regards to it. But look, you did it. You made the right call. You get back, you refresh a little bit, and now you get back to the grind for the next few months and try and deal with everything going on. So I'm glad you're back. It definitely was not the same without you, but it's good because you come back refreshed, a new perspective. You get back. What was it like real fast traveling back, I believe, on the day of the Super Bowl? Was it a little bit of nerves like, shit, if there's one delay, we don't get back on time? Or did you give yourself enough wiggle room with hours to get back so you could watch the biggest football game of the year?
So we had more than enough time to get back. The weird thing is about coming back, and this is the weird thing about kind of everything that took place while we were on this cruise and on this vacation. There's so much real life stuff going on that you constantly kept, but we didn't pay for the internet package because the internet on a boat is ridiculous. It would have cost quite a few $100s to have the internet for the amount of time that we were on the boat. Okay. So we didn't pay for it, but my phone would still get important messages that would come through from the news outlets, from, I don't know, I was keeping up on different sports aspects. I was keeping up on different current events, and you had everything taking place with foreign objects flying over the United States. On our way back, that actually impacted us. The one that got shot down over
Huron.
Lake Huron, that one impacted us. On our way back in, and I don't think anybody on the airplane actually realized what the hell was going on. But we came back in, and because I fly every day for work, I kind of recognize landmarks. We get into the Detroit airspace, like downtown's airspace or near downtown. And the airplane starts circling around Groseal. And I'm like, what are we doing circling around Groseal? Like, what is going on here? I was like, there's Groseal. We just keep kind of coming back and then circling back and coming back and circling back. They basically were doing what they were doing with that airspace, and they were shutting it down. And as we were approaching it, they were in the process of shutting it down. They had to make a decision on whether or not they were going to allow us to land. Oh. So they ended up letting us in. I got home in enough time to basically clean up around the house, unpack everything, and start a couple loads of laundry, and have enough time to make dinner and watch the Super Bowl. But yeah, man, it was one of those things where real life almost took over, and I almost did miss the Super Bowl because they had to figure out if they were going to let us come in and land at Metro or not. Like I said, they did. That was cool.
Do they announce
and
it?
And then fast forward to.
Do they say
what was that?
On the plane? Do they announce we are circling? They don't say nothing.
Nope.
You don't say nothing.
Nothing. They don't tell you anything. And like I was lucky because I was sitting next to a window, so that was the only reason I knew. And I was just kind of like, I realized that I flew Delta, and if you fly Delta, they have a monitor in front of your headset there, or in front of the seat's back of the head, and it had a flight track on it, and basically it was a straight line from Fort Lauderdale to Detroit.
Yes.
And I noticed along the route, all of a sudden it had us going towards Cleveland, and then it had us bending back towards Detroit. So if we had to abort, they were going to force us to land in Cleveland, or they were going to have us deviate and go back to Cleveland. So we had to go through Cleveland's airspace to then get near Detroit's airspace, and for them to figure out if they were going to let us in. So like I realized that was going on. I realized that the flight plan had adjusted. Again, I don't think anybody else notices. It's weird. People don't necessarily notice what's actually going on around them. They're just so inundated with, I don't know, their phones, television, whatever it is. There's 1,001 things that can sidetrack you and pull your attention away from where you're currently at. So it was alarming to me. And I even said something to my girlfriend. I was like, why are they deviating us? Why are they having us go off course? Yeah. And like, you're in airplane mode on the airplane. So
yes,
you're not sure what's exactly going on.
Okay. So you were able to be a creature of the moment without being connected. That's my biggest thing, is that I don't need to be dialed into the world. I do need to be dialed into text and learning and kind of being available for people who need, information from me. So I can't be completely off the grid. And that's why the whole Aaron Rodgers thing is fascinating, is that he's going off the grid for 4 days in darkness, and it's a bunch of mental exercises. Did you just kind of just be a creature of being with your girlfriend, being with the family, eating and hanging out and just trying to be patient? Because shit, I would have paid the couple $100 for the internet at least.
Yeah, it was great going off the grid. Look, me and you are totally different in this. And this is why, for the most part, you are actually, there is no most part. You are basically in charge of the Twitter account, because I don't like social media.
Right.
I don't really care for it. I set up an Instagram, and I removed the Instagram app from being present on my phone, because I found I was spending way too much time looking at things, and I do a lot of these check-ins with myself. It's you and I have talked about this. I basically go to therapy. I have a lot of rage issues, so I do these constant check-ins with myself. It's something that me and my therapist have worked on and set up. And doing these check-ins on myself, I realized I started to feel certain ways about myself and about certain things. And I was like, you don't need this in your life. You don't have to do this. So I removed Instagram. Okay. I still have Twitter because of the podcast. I still have Facebook because of family and friends. What I find is I do sometimes shuffle in Facebook or Twitter to replace that fixation of looking at social media. But it did feel really nice to not be attached to my cell phone, to not be attached to social media, to not be attached to basically the world. There was a point where I think it was probably like day 4. I was like, I have no idea what's going on anywhere.
That's
like,
good. That's good.
I really don't. It was weird, and it's good because you come back and you kind of have like a reset, and you're like, I don't need all that stuff. I don't have to do those things.
And that's the key.
So,
that's the key, is that social media tends to send people who are not exactly, dealing with everything correctly into a more negative space. And I think that's where people have to realize that social media is toxic. You need to find your own way to filter it so that you cannot, find yourself in the rabbit hole of negativity, because you can end up really psyching yourself out to not want to leave your house ever if you go down the rabbit hole of social media. That's why you got to disconnect, use good notifications to block out words that are toxic, and you don't have to go down the rabbit hole of listening to everybody vent on social media. You go there to get information. You can tailor it in a way where you just get the information that you like that can be uplifting. So that's where it's good to disconnect and things like that. But of course, you leave, and now the United States is getting, spied on by China, and UFOs are all over the place, and the world is going into chaos. So real interesting timing for you to come back. You're like, oh my God.
Dude, it was nuts. I leave, and you sent it to me best. We do a wrestling podcast. If any of you are interested in wrestling, check out the DocNJock wrestling podcast. Drops every Sunday. Usually it could drop on a Saturday if there's a big pay-per-view like we've got coming up this week. You said it. I leave, and wrestling got so good. It got so damn awesome. There was so much good stuff that took place the week I go. I leave, the world feels like it's falling apart and things are just crumbling. I go back to work on Monday night. I'm sitting inside of a hockey locker room, putting my ice skates on and getting dressed to go out for this hockey practice that I have. And next thing you know, I'm getting messages about craziness unfolding on MSU's campus, and I've got to figure out if I've got to go fly or I've got to go cover this. And we're trying to figure out what is going on and how this is going to get taken care of. And it's like I left for a week, man, and all of a sudden the world has hit the fall apart button, and it just didn't hit it. It like slammed on it 19 times, and it really does feel like things are just falling apart all the way around us. It's crazy.
Absolutely. It's crazy too, because I recommended Adam go on vacation. We talked about it, and it's crazy. I think subconsciously, I didn't think about it until this morning before we recorded. I personally hate the whole fucking month of February. Bad things have happened. Tragic things have happened in my family and personally. I don't like the month. Luckily, it's the shortest month of the year, but it just brings about bad memories, and I overcompensate and just try to do a bunch of things that I like to be happy. And it stinks because I'm very connected to Michigan State, and you start to see the alerts, and it's 8 o'clock at night during Raw, and that's the time I'm close with my daughter. She loves it. She's all into it. She's into Cody Rhodes. She's into Sami Zayn. She's all into it, and all of a sudden, now I'm getting distracted because there's this alert going on at Michigan State, and it's horrible too, because naturally you want to know what's going on. And so you go to Twitter, and that is just a spot where everybody's throwing out craziness. And then obviously the kids got to go to bed. So for me, naturally, I tape wrestling so I could delay it a little bit. And I found myself getting pissed because I understand the news's need to interview these kids. And I go to WXYZ. That's the station I always have gone to when news breaks. I'm a fan of Channel 7, always have been. Not to say anything bad about the others, just the one I like. And all of a sudden, the reporter is interviewing these kids with their hands up. They're all pissed. They're all confused. And my mind goes, this doesn't need to be aired. Get these kids help. They obviously are traumatized. And my brain just kept saying, obviously, I was conflicted. I was like, I know they need to do this. I know people are watching. But I felt like the reporter should have just turned the damn camera off and get these kids out of the way. You are in an active shooter scene. It's not the time for you to be going, hey, guys, what do you know? And all these kids are like, we don't know shit. We don't know what's going on. We're trying to figure out. We just left a parking lot. Who's safe? Who's not? It was a scene that needed to not be aired, and it was chaotic. There were people going on scanners, and see, that's the part that was scary was they're reporting 7 different shootings at different spots, and they're naming spots that I'm familiar with, and you're just hoping that it's like your mind goes to the worst spot, like, oh my gosh, did he do 30 people? What's going on? Because you figure if you go to a crowded space and you're able to let stuff go, you could do some significant damage, and I got way caught up, and I knew I was doing it too. I was like, I shouldn't be watching this. I felt myself getting reacted. I was upset, frustrated. I was more upset just looking at the coverage side of it. Like, these kids need to be helped. I know they're going to need to be debriefed, and so the psychologist side more came out, just being upset that this is the way that they were going to cover it. But it was frustrating to watch that live. Yeah,
most definitely. And look, I think this is an interesting conversation for us to have because you are an MSU alum. You graduated from school there. You have intimate knowledge of the layout of that campus. You had times there. And as this is basically unfolded over the last couple of days, I've had this thought, and you tell me kind of where you're at. So I attended college a few years after you, and there was a point where you and I were in college at the same time as you were going for your master's, and I was on my 9-year hiatus to get a bachelor's degree. But when I went to college, I never worried about these things. I never worried about an active shooter. I never worried about getting attacked. I never worried about really anything. And look, I went to school. I went to Wayne State, and then I actually earned my degree from Oakland University. And when I would go to Wayne State, I spent a good solid 6 years of my college career, we'll call it that, at Wayne State. And I partied a lot. That's why it was a 6-year career at Wayne State with no degree to show for it. I spent a ton of time partying, chasing girls, hanging out, doing things in basically the areas of downtown Detroit and midtown Detroit. And the only thing you ever really had to worry about was possibly getting bothered by a homeless man who was looking for loose change. That was the only thing you really had to worry about. I never had to worry about my car really getting broken into. Never really had to worry about any big issues. The biggest issue I needed to be concerned about was in my drunken state. How was I going to get from either a fraternity house or from University Towers back to wherever I was going to sleep that night? That was my biggest concern, without getting caught by the police and getting a drunken violation. That was it. Then when I went to Oakland University a few years later, I took a little time off, went to Oakland University a few years later, and there I just grinded. I ended up busting through and got my degree done in basically 2.5 years in something that I had spent zero time working on at Wayne State. Figured out what I was passionate in, and I went for it. Got it done. I never had to worry about these things. Never, ever. Never did it ever cross my mind that I had to worry about somebody showing up with a gun, somebody showing up with a knife, somebody basically showing up and terrorizing anybody. Those weren't concerns. My biggest concern when I went to Oakland was, where am I going to be able to park? Because I was showing up either in the middle of the afternoon when all the classes were in session, or I was showing up later in the day and there were classes in session, and parking there was an absolute nightmare. Those were my concerns. It feels as though we have crossed this bridge where there is this age of innocence that has died. And that age of innocence basically died with you and I. It died when you and I were going to school. It died a few years after we ended up getting our degrees. It is no longer a thing where you can go to college and feel safe. You can't go to high school and feel safe. When we were in school, they basically gave us fire drills. They were like, look, this is what happens when you have a fire. And I don't know about you, but when I was in grade school and when I was in high school, I kind of look forward to the fire drills, a reason to get out of class and a reason to go kind of mingle with some of your friends. And you never really took it all that serious. Kids nowadays have shelter in place drills.
Yeah.
Like if there's an active shooter, this is what we do.
Yeah.
It is crazy to me how in a few short years we have gotten to this point. And look, you've got two beautiful daughters. I love your daughters so much. I love hanging out with your daughters. You can't ever really say as an adult and as an adult male, you really enjoy hanging out with two small children that happen to be female. But your daughters are cool as shit. I love hanging out with them. I think they're great. You have two awesome kids that have to now live in this chaotic ass world. I don't have kids. I have the hopes and dreams of having children one day. I don't have any kids. I am scared to have children because of the craziness that goes on every single day. And you and I will have this conversation. This will be a good conversation. It might fuel some people up. It might not. But it is one of those things where when these things happen, it is so in your face and it is so upsetting. But in 3 days, 4 days, it gets kind of flushed by the wayside. And it's like, all right, cool. And then there'll be another one. And then it'll be the same cycle. And it just kind of is rinse, repeat. And I think that is the most frustrating part about all of it. It is just so damn frustrating. And there's so much inconsistencies that I really feel like could help prevent some of this stuff. But it just doesn't happen. And it's frustrating. And you going to Michigan State, I think it's good to get your point of view on it because you went there at a different time. It is like worlds apart.
Absolutely.
Did you ever fear or did you ever feel unsafe when you were on campus?
No, never at all. That was the biggest reason why my parents were a little bit hesitant, but the reason why I went there was I was sheltered as a kid, and I said to my parents, I'm like, I don't even know how to do my laundry. I'm like, I'll get you guys a degree in 4 years. I want to grow up. I know I'm ready. I want to kind of grow up, and that was the trust given. I'm like, I'll get you a degree in 4 years, I promise. I gave them my word because it was going to be expensive. It was going to be the first time I was going to be away, and I had the trust that I had a level head that I could balance, and I thought that it was going to be the ultimate test. Like, okay, you're going to have the ultimate temptations, but you're going to have the ultimate fun. So 97 to 2001, I was in the university, and it was great. It was carefree. It was great. I got the best of both worlds where I partied 1 day a week, and I studied and went to work the rest. And that was the agreement, was get your degree. I had friends that flunked out. I had friends that didn't understand that, no, going to college is not partying 4 days a week. You have your fun. And I'm so thankful because I can put it out there. If there were cameras available in 97 to 2001, there is no podcast. There is no psychology practice. There is no license. All of that would have gotten me canceled 50 times over. And I can boast that I would have been canceled 50 times for things you do, say, act. It was fun. But it was all under the guise of college youthful fun, and it was all alcohol-induced. It wasn't the person that I am. It was just 1 night a week. You have a good time, you let loose, and you act a fool. And it was great, and it produced some of the best nights of my life. Celebrating Michigan State winning the national title on campus was amazing. But I got up, stayed up till 6 a.m., slept for 45 minutes, and was in class with 3 other people, and we got to leave early. But that was it. It was work hard, play hard, and that always stuck with me. Before the song came out, it's work hard, play hard. You can do both. So I just was Googling. Columbine happened in April of 99.
Yep.
And that's when
I was in high school.
Yeah, that's when it kind of started to, you thought maybe it was an outlier, but it ended up being a trend. And I never felt unsafe at Michigan State. It's still, I walk there freely. I still will. I still believe in that. And I know the world is chaotic, but in my practice as a psychologist, I tell people, you can't philosophically, you can't worry and have faith at the same time. So that is how I get through the chaos of life, is that I'm faithful, that every day that I'm alive will be a good day, and I hope that nothing like that will ever happen to people close to me. But tough stuff happens, and it's happened when I was younger, and it's happened recently. But what happens is that you try to compartmentalize it in the manner in which you cope, and the faith has allowed me to move forward, and the willingness to cope in a way that's healthy allows me to get through stuff. Otherwise, you fall apart when you're 23 and tragic stuff happens that just shocks you and sends your world in a different direction. But at the time in 97, I was ready. I was like 18. I'm like, I need to leave because otherwise my mother was going to she would have said, here, I'll get you a job. I'll get you a car. I'll pay all your bills. I'll do all your laundry. And I was like, Mom, I love it. I love you to death. I love you to pieces. But that's not going to work for me. I need to kind of grow up a little bit. And I knew Michigan State was going to be a place where I could handle it. It wasn't going to be crazy. So and I love the place. I go there 4 or 5 times a year because it's so serene. It has the campus-like feel. Yeah, the innocence is lost, but it's been lost. And the way I look at it is, in life, through the chaos, there's joy in the things that you do. And that's what I do, is everything that I'm involved in, I take an extra amount of joy and gratefulness to be able to do it, to be able to do a podcast for a decade, to be able to go online and rile people up and rile people down and have people, react to something that is so innocuous. Because our biggest tweet of the year is just some maybe fake, which I think is great. Real quick sidebar. Our biggest tweet of the year could be something that was fake and staged, which is so classic and fun that it just encompasses how life is. And I enjoy the ability to do things. And that's what you got to do, is that through the chaos, I knew, okay, watching the news for that 20 minutes was going to be painful, or for those couple hours and be very painful. But in the end, you have to find joy in the life that you have. And you have to find the ability to get back up and battle. And Michigan State will. Thoughts and supreme prayers for everybody that's been tragically affected by anything negative in their life. And there's a lot of trauma in the world. But I'm different in that I've been trained to debrief. I've been trained to handle trauma. So for me, getting away on vacation is just a momentary escape from the daily tasks of being around it. I choose to be around it. I like to be around chaos because I have answers that tend to promote happiness. Like, I've been through a lot. We've all been through a lot. But I found through study and psychology and resiliency and getting back up and having failures that there's opportunities to unite, and there's going to be great opportunity for the Spartan community to unite and support those that have been impacted. I choose to look at, when there are challenges, how do we respond as people? And I have no doubt, less than zero doubt, that the Spartan community will rally. We will learn from this. The community will learn from this. And hopefully there'll be some more lessons that can be taken away from it. That's all you can do in life, is to rally, learn from mistakes, understand what happened, understand what caused this individual to act in this toxic manner. But there has to be growth as people, and there has to be movement in a direction of how do we prevent this. And kudos to the students, kudos to Michigan State and their police to have those constant alerts, to have all that surveillance, to be able to put out pictures and to talk every hour, to give people information. So I look at it from, what can you learn? How do you be resilient? And how it just makes you appreciate each and every day that much more, that, hey, tomorrow's not guaranteed. I'm having as much fun as I can today, and I'll look at things in a less than non-serious way online. That's why the Twitter page is a complete try to be sarcastic and joke about it, because sports is not supposed to be all that serious. You're not supposed to take life that seriously. There's some levity, and that's maybe sometimes will rub people the wrong way when there's some things that you post that, kind of are sarcastic and of a light nature. But that's how you get through life. You have to. Otherwise, you're going to be anxious, and you're going to be uptight, and you're going to really be scared to get outside and do anything. But people are going to rally. People are going to rally from this. And the blessing is that it's going to teach people to be resilient for those that need it, and the Spartan community. And the good thing is to see the Michigan community rally as well. When times are tough, ultimately, the subset of our world is chaotic. But when times are tough, through 9/11, through the toughest tragedies that this country has faced, we unite in great ways. And that's what I saw, and that's what I'm going to choose to focus on. And hopefully people can find it through the work that they do. But yeah, anybody that's struggling, please seek out mental health therapy. It just teaches you to be happy. And that's hopefully the vibe that you get from our podcast, is that, yeah, we've all been through tough times. I look at it when I go through February, I say, fuck February, I hate the whole fucking month, but it will end. And the next thought is, fucking March is going to be fucking awesome, because it represents newness, spring, the end of the toxic shit of February, and the newness of new weather in Michigan. And that's how I choose to conduct business. And that's how I look to move forward from tough times. And being a Spartan alum has been great. It taught me the most important lessons in life because it was the ultimate test. Because you could go there and end up with 4 or 5 addictions and 4 or 5 kids and a bunch of STDs, or you could go there, get a degree that will teach you how to set up your life. And that's the ultimate test. I passed it. I knew I was going to pass it. And it was literally the most fun 4 years that a human being could have. And that's why I always speak positively of Michigan State. But if anybody were to film it and just look at it without knowing it, you would think I was all the isms and ists and things that it was bad, but it was fun at the same time. And I'll never forget those moments. It taught me a lot of lessons. I grew up. I became a man coming out of that, and I earned a spot to get into someone accepted me into grad school after coming out of Michigan State. So it was good, and it's. I hope everybody has that experience. But in all seriousness, would I let my daughters go away to college? No, I don't think so. And not in this day and age. There's just the ultimate temptation now with phones and what people can expose and learn and be a part of. It's way too much. So every time we drive by Oakland, I'm like, kids, this is great. This is the greatest university. This is where I covered sports. This is where I drive them through it. I'm like, you guys are going here, and it's going to be figured out.
It is MSU light, so if that makes you feel any better.
Exactly. And I hope people recognize that. Through tragedy, there is triumph, and focus on the triumph part. And I think that'll guide people in a better spot to deal with things. So I hope it is. Did you watch the coverage, or how did you kind of take it all in?
So, like I said, I was basically getting ready to go and skate. So I basically followed along with stuff on my phone. The next day for work, we had to go out there and grab some footage of it because the guys at night couldn't go up there and get some footage of what was actually taking place. So we had to go fly out there mid-morning and go grab some footage of some different stuff for the news stations. But I basically followed along with my phone and then watching the news and the coverage with the news. I read a couple of different articles to kind of follow along with everything. I think the one big thing that I've taken out of all of this, right, besides it being awful and tragic and extremely sad and frustrating that we're even having this conversation, the Michigan State Police and the Michigan State University Police, I think, deserve to be applauded. With the job that they did with all of this was absolutely incredible. And like you said, you had people listening to police scanners, and then you had sick individuals calling in fake reports, and you had other individuals providing colorful details that didn't actually happen. And the thing is, the police had to check all of those. While there was a crazed gunman on the loose who just killed 3 people and injured 5 others and terrified thousands of people, you have people calling in these random reports. And instead of the police being able to go do their job to apprehend this suspect, which they later did before he ended up, they approached him. He ended up taking his own life. But they had to go and look into all of these reports. And just the thought process of this slowing down the investigation and how quickly they acted and how quickly this was all really taken care of was crazy to me. Like to have that type of workload and have to deal with everything and then go through all the rooms in these university buildings. You've been to a university, there's a ton of rooms. They've got to clear every single room, and they've got to inspect everybody who's in there. On top of that, it's now a crime scene, so it has to be processed. Like this is time-consuming work that has to get done. And then this happens at another building. So now you've got to track everything from one building to the other building. And if you know where these 2 buildings are located, it's approximately, I would say, anywhere from a quarter mile to maybe a half mile, maybe a little bit longer than that, but not much more apart. So that's a lot of ground that they have to cover, and they've got to do the same thing at the other building. And then they've got to follow these tips, and they've got to follow all this stuff to track this individual down, who ends up almost, I want to say, probably a mile and a half away from where the last shooting took place at MSU's Union Hall. So it's crazy to me, the job that they did and how efficiently they did it, with all of the false reports and all of the bad information that they were getting. I do believe that they deserve to be applauded, and I think it was absolutely fantastic. Their crisis unit that they have to deal with these situations is awesome. All the training that they have paid off. It was great the way that it just kind of, it was horrible the way it all unfolded, but it was great that the way that they handled that chaos. And I think they deserved a little bit of recognition. Thought it was admirable how they took care of business.
Okay. I don't want to spend a lot of time. I just was browsing Twitter as we were talking and listening and things like that. I don't want to go into deep details, and of course we don't want to offend anybody, but obviously we now know kind of where people stand in regards to gun laws and stuff like that. So, obviously Michigan State has this rock that's been there for 150 years. People spray messages, and obviously the first message was a message of hope. Well, this morning on Wednesday, a latest message was posted and said, "Allow us to defend ourselves, carry on campus." So, and like I said, everybody has their stance regarding guns and what they think about it and mental health and the way in which people think about these kind of things. I look at it, and here's my stance, and it's just going to be real quick. You can just give yours, and we're going to move on, because everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm not passionate about changing people's mind. I state my case, you state yours, and I'm the easiest person to get along with, because if you have a difference of agreement, fine, we'll agree to disagree, and we'll keep it moving. I got more fun things to talk about, but knowing where we're at, it's just hard to walk it back when your mind tells you there are 400 million guns and 300 million people. So I'm more of the opinion of people just need to be able to carry and defend themselves, give themselves a chance. Now, if we had a chance to rewind everything and I can go back in time with my magic time machine and go back to 1920, I would make strict gun laws, of course. But now that the cat's out of the bag and I'm living in the real world in 2023, you're not going to take it away from people. It's already done. I'm living in the real world. So I'm of the opinion you let people arm themselves, and you hopefully take extra precautions to not let people get into public buildings with guns. So that's my stance on it. Where do you stand in regards to potentially letting students pack heat?
Pretty similar to you. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to have students on campus with guns. I don't think that's the right decision. I don't think that's the right way to go. Similar to you, I don't think you're going to be able to walk this back, right? Like, people have guns, and there's no way you're going to get all the guns off the street. Just isn't going to happen. If you wanted to do that, that needed to be taken care of a long time ago. It's not gonna. There's constitutional laws that allow you to arm yourself and bear arms, and we don't need to go down the rabbit hole of arguing what that was about back then and how it doesn't necessarily relate to now. I don't think you're going to be able to take people's guns away, but I think that there are steps and there are things that can be done to, one, make it harder for people to get firearms. Two, I think there's a better process that could be instituted to make sure people who are either mentally ill or have a criminal background, make it harder for them to get firearms. And then I think there needs to be some stricter policies and stricter codes on when and where and how you can carry guns. Also, I think putting either off-duty deputies or putting different police that are armed inside buildings like schools, I think that might be able to help deter some of these situations. I know when I went to school, we had a lot of bomb threats that were called in right after Columbine. Next thing you know, we had a very heavy police presence at school. My school had 2 floors, and it was a massive campus, and we had police on both floors at all ends of the school, and they ended up putting fire detector or metal detectors in, and they got away from us using backpacks. We all had to use clear backpacks for a little bit. And basically after they kind of strictened up everything and put the police there and made it much more difficult to get around school, and you couldn't take your bags with you, and they really changed a lot of what your everyday life was, those fake bomb threats stopped. All those things stopped. So I think if you make things a little bit tougher, it will help lower and really help mitigate some of what goes on. Because again, I don't think you're going to be able to take people's guns away. And I don't think that there's necessarily a way to get the illegal guns, all of them, off the street. And I think you can help improve the situation. I don't necessarily know if you can ever completely fix the situation, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's tough, like I said, and it's a tough thing, and hopefully we can continue to have civil discourse. See, Adam and I expressed slightly different opinions, and we can still be fine, and nobody's yelling at each other, nobody's insulting each other. Civil discourse, that's how we move forward. That's how we are able to debate sports and have fun, is that you battle it out, and then you walk away, bro hug, and keep it moving. So in regards to the biggest football game of the year, I was completely into it. I was excited for it, planned the day, and it left me completely unsatisfied. Now, I think the right team won. Obviously, you're conflicted, but in the end, I picked the Eagles to win because I posted on Twitter at Detroit Podcast, I was letting my fandom as it pertains to the Lions take over in that. You wanted the Eagles to win because they're the better constructed team. The Chiefs have the better quarterback, but by and large, typically, the team in football that has the better quarterback and is playing the best has the opportunity to win. So that's what makes, and we'll have this discussion a little bit later, that's what made the Chiefs' loss a little disheartening if you're a Lions fan looking to see them rebuild and where they need to go. But overall, I was disappointed in that, one, the commercials were really awful. They were just really bad. Didn't care too much about Rihanna. I thought that, okay, that's a time for me to get up, take a break a little bit, passively pay attention, so I don't care too much about who's singing it. Now, the part that sucked was it was a beautifully crafted game. It was nice. It was put together well. Two teams back and forth. Now, you get to a critical moment in the game, and cornerback James Bradbury is guarding Juju Smith-Schuster. And yes, of course, in a tough way to guard receivers in a tough moment in the game, tied, Bradbury grabs the receiver. It's not a question. It's not debatable. He did it. The debate comes in, being that I watch hockey, and I watched hockeys in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, where they would swallow their whistle with about 5 minutes left in the third quarter and in overtime. They swallow their whistle. Unless you basically took a guy's head off, there was not going to be a call. The officials didn't have to throw the flag and give the Chiefs an opportunity to kick the field goal and win the game. You took all the intrigue out of the Super Bowl by the decision. Terrible. What say you?
Look, I agree with you. I thought this was a fantastic football game. This was one of the more entertaining football games that we've had, not just all season, but of all time. This was such a good Super Bowl with two teams that were so efficient and operated at such a high caliber. You mean to tell me that these defenses only held that one time? Because there were no defensive holding calls all game long. And you and I can go back, we could watch that football game, and I think we could probably find 15, 16 defensive holding calls that were probably more egregious than that one. That play, and again, remember, you're at the line of scrimmage. You basically have 5 yards to kind of bump and grind and to kind of try to impede the wide receiver if you're a defensive back. And yeah, there was a little bit of a tug on the back of the jersey. You go back, you watch where that ball was thrown. I don't think Juju Smith-Schuster had a chance in hell of catching that ball. That ball was so overthrown. For them to throw a flag at that moment in that game is super frustrating, and it really did spoil what was a fantastic game. This was like you getting with your high school crush and you getting all the way to the bedroom and you're about to do it. You're about to seal the deal. You get her shirt off, titties looking nice. You get her pants off. She's in some nice Victoria's Secret underwear that gets you going even more. And next thing you know, you take her panties down and it's just Fur Burger Nation. She's got basically an afro down there and it smells funny. You're just like, well, this kind of sucks. It just basically took the air out of the room and you were left there basically holding your own bag. And it was just kind of frustrating to watch this unfold because this was such a good game. And look, the Chiefs were probably going to kick a field goal there. Now, no guarantee that Butker makes it because dealing with a bad leg, he had missed a field goal earlier in the game, and he had struggled a little bit as this year has kind of worn on. That being said, you would have gave the ball back to Jalen Hurts with a minute and a half or so left in the game, maybe closer to 2 minutes, you would have given him the ball back with enough time to at least have a rebuttal. And that's what we were looking for. We were looking for the rebuttal. And you know what? If they can get in position to kick a field goal, cool. We get extra football. Let's go and let's see what happens. And then we can argue about the overtime rules if we really wanted to. But all that being said, you took that away from us. You didn't give us the opportunity to have that. And now we're basically here, and you're watching a football game where the refs had a direct impact on the outcome of the game. And I think that is what leaves such a bad taste in everybody's mouth, because for 97% of this game, it was fantastic. The calls were good. Everything was good. And then the final 3% of the game, the referees are going to come in and it's got their fingerprints all over it. And look, there's no way to say that the Eagles were going to win that game or the Eagles were going to tie that game. But you took the opportunity away from the Eagles. And because of that, you have every right to be upset, especially if you're an Eagles fan. You have every right to be upset with how that played out, because that was the most ticky-tack call that I think I've ever seen. And for it to impact the biggest game of the year, I think is just sad. I think it is frustrating, and I think it is incredibly upsetting. To me, it frustrated me. It left me wanting a little bit more, and we just didn't get it. And
exactly. And then you look at it too, and you look at the National Football League and all the resources that they have. Part of the reason why the Eagles lost, it's not an excuse. Maybe they would have lost. Maybe they would end up losing to the Chiefs because they got Mahomes. But you owed it to the Eagles to give them at least a playing surface where they could take advantage of the skills that they had. For players to be slipping all over the place, you can't spend near $1 million to cultivate a field and to have it be put in place by a 94-year-old sod father, and the field looks terrible. It's getting you've seen all the GIFs of the kicker slipping. You've seen Hassan Reddick trying to make moves, and yes, both teams played on it. But you can't discount that part of the reason why the Eagles didn't, have as much success getting to Patrick Mahomes was the playing surface wasn't good enough. And it's not acceptable. And that's what disappoints me is when, how I don't understand when people can do with far less. We are a network of 4 people, and we've had success in the world of sports. Now, imagine if we had a $2 million budget. What you could do with studios and lights and television and what you could do. If you have $1 million to spend to cultivate a field, how does it get that slippery? I don't understand the premise of or the outcome of not optimal situations where you invest in the most important thing that is part of the game. It's the playing field, and it's not good enough. So for that storyline to come out was devastating. It sucked. It took away from the football game. It's like, how do you play the Super Bowl and make it so that both teams can't get their footing? Now, maybe they liked it because the offense was there. Testament to both teams, but both teams also had good defenses. But that part of the game, which a certain segment of your fan base and reporters like. So for that to happen too, I thought took away from the game. And that's what bothers me, is that there should be no reason why a league with that many resources can't come up and handle business. And I don't think it's rigged. I don't think it's that. It's just you're never going to get perfect officiating. I just thought that the officials at that time, I don't think would have taken as much heat for not throwing it as they did for throwing it. And I think Greg Olsen might have muddied the waters a little bit, but he's a player too, and he's a former player who understands that for the good of the game, you don't throw the flag. It's not going to be impactful because the Chiefs were in field goal range already. You give the Eagles the opportunity one more time to get the football back, and that's what marred it for me. And so it was nice to enjoy. It was great. We can now extrapolate what the Lions can do, but here's the reason why I was disheartened. If you're a Lions fan, you're building like the Eagles. You don't have Patrick Mahomes. As much as you want to try and tell yourself that Jared Goff is elite, he's good. He's serviceable. You're building around him. Similar to the Eagles in that Jalen Hurts still developing as a quarterback, obviously is developing as a pocket passer, but known more for his legs. But you built a nice offensive line. You built a solid defensive line. significant upgrades at the cornerback spot with Darius Slay and Bradbury, who made plays. So you, as a Lions fan, needed the Eagles to win because that's how it's going to be when you get to the postseason. When you get there, you're going to be facing a quarterback that's probably going to be better than yours. So, it could end up being, it very much could end up being one day, if it all works out, the Lions against the Chiefs. And you're going to have a team built in the trenches, a team built with a nice defense and solid weapons, nice offense, decent coaching, but you're going to end up probably up against Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes, one of the elite quarterbacks. And if it stinks, but if that elite quarterback's on and he's slinging it, finding the tight windows, willing his team with a high ankle sprain, the Lions are fucked. And that's the part I don't want to see. That would hurt. That would be disheartening if the Lions build a team, they get to the promised land, and one individual rises above with supreme play. That's what the Chiefs were able to get. And that's what is awesome. And that's what people that don't understand why I criticize Stafford and Goff and everybody. I said, find the guy. Come hell or high water. Spend 20 hours a day finding the next Mahomes. You could have had him, but you didn't take the risk. Find the next Mahomes because then you don't need to build a team. But the Lions are going a different route. And you could argue, too, that, Mahomes was beat when the better team, the Buccaneers, were able to dominate him. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of the Lions are building, and they're building in the trenches, which bodes well. But I'm also very concerned that when the time comes and the biggest game of the year comes in, one of these elite quarterbacks could come in and just blow us out of the water.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that you have to take out of the Super Bowl, right? Is if you're the Detroit Lions, what can you glean from this game? What can you take from it? If you're going to be facing quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or insert top elite quarterback here, you don't necessarily have that. And it doesn't look like you're going to have that, at least not for the foreseeable future. We would say at least the next 3 years or so. So what do? You have to build your defense. You got to build up a nasty defense. You've got to be able to provide a pass rush, and you've got to find a secondary that can cover guys downfield and hopefully not hold them in the final 2 minutes of the game when you're near the red zone. So how do you do that? I think with this team, and like you said, I think this team is constructing itself very similar to how Philadelphia has constructed itself. Look, Jalen Hurts is a very good quarterback, but he's no Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if he'll ever be a Patrick Mahomes. I don't think he will. I think he will for the rest of his career. I think he will be a very good quarterback. Dude's about to cash in big here. They're talking maybe $50 million a year for him. Fine, he deserves it. He's done a really nice job. All that being said, you're the Detroit Lions. You've got a quarterback in Jared Goff that is on a very reasonable contract right now, and you hold his rights for the next year or two. So what do? You build around him, and you've got to build on the other side of the ball because I think you've got impactful guys on offense, right? We talk about building through the trenches on both sides. Your offensive line is very good. Your offensive line looks very similar to what Philadelphia has. Is Philadelphia is a little bit better at basically running the ball? Yeah. They're a little bit better at run blocking. But you've got a really good offensive line that's good for pass blocking. So they're almost equivalent. You've got guys on the outside who can take the top off the defense. You got guys who can catch the ball underneath. You got guys who can do different things to open up space and get the ball and move it downfield. On top of that, you've got a quarterback who meshes really, really well with your creative offensive coordinator. It really feels as though Detroit and Philadelphia specifically, and you can even look at Kansas City in this aspect. You've got offensive coordinators and you've got quarterbacks and you've got pieces on that side of the ball where it all meshes really, really well and they're able to produce. Now, this is the one thing that I took out of the offensive side of the ball. And this runs a little bit counterintuitive to what you and I have spoke about when it comes to free agents. We both believe that Jamal Williams is a guy that should be brought back. He's a good locker room fit. He had a hell of a season this year and produced, especially with some question marks around DeAndre Swift and his health. But the one thing I think you can take out of this is the running backs in this game, the ones that competed on the field, the ones that really produced, they weren't high draft picks and they didn't cost you a lot of money. It really feels like that resource, those dollars, can get put elsewhere to help make the team a little bit better. So it really makes me think that I don't necessarily know if you need Jamal Williams to come back if you're going to compete at that level. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, obviously pass rush is important, but you need good linebacking play and you need a good secondary. As much as you can do up front, because if you look at what Kansas City did, they were able to put a little bit of pressure on Jalen Hurts. They forced a turnover, scored a touchdown. That was big in that game. Like that helped win that game. It helped keep Kansas City close at a time when their offense was sputtering a little bit. So you need to improve that defensive line, and you need to find a secondary that can shut guys down and try to take guys out of plays. And those were the big things that I took out of this game, that if you're the Detroit Lions, you need to try to recreate this. You need to try to be like this. Now, look, we both agree you're not going to get your Patrick Mahomes unless you somehow take a flyer on somebody late and he turns out to be that. I don't think either one of us have faith in that. And it is really hard to do that, okay? So rolling with what you got, which is Jared Goff, I think the easiest thing to do is just invest in that defense and really build that defense up and make it mean, make it nasty, and make it be able to get to the quarterback. Make it be able to get there and put pressure and lock guys up and force turnovers. Because I think that was the other thing I really took out of this is the defenses were able to force turnovers and then able to capitalize on it. And the defense was able to help keep the teams afloat when the offenses seemed like they were struggling to find their footing. No pun intended with the awful field. So what did you really take out of it? What was like the one thing where you're like, the Lions need to do this?
See, I debated. I was going back and forth. I was like, you know what? Put a package together. Go up to number one. Get Bryce Young, and take a step back in 23 for ultimate success in 24 and 25. Because here's the thing, okay? And look, building steadily and slowly and the quote unquote right way is fine. You potentially could be the Patriots or the Chiefs if you build correctly. But why not potentially end up being like the Dynasty Patriots, where you have the baddest quarterback in the world and you can win multiple Super Bowls, 6 of them? Why not? Maybe you take that ultimate gamble and trade a couple draft picks. Fuck them picks, like Les Snead said. So what my mind kept racing to was, okay, are we building a Super Bowl winner? I don't see that. What I see is you're building like the 49ers, where they perennially get there, always end up short. Oh, darn, Purdy gets hurt. You don't have a quarterback. Oh, you have Jimmy G, who misses an open receiver in the biggest game of the year. Oh, they end up losing the Super Bowl. So that's where my mind goes. And obviously, I tend to lean that way, more negative in sports and what can be the worst case scenario that could happen. Right now, which is fine, getting to the postseason and having devastating losses in the grand scheme of things would be great, would be much better.
Oh, you would take it.
I would take it all day. Best way. But I'm looking at it like, man, why can't the Lions have the Patrick Mahomes? Why can't, for once, we dominate the headlines with the baddest man on the planet, the best of the best? And that's what every NFL team is looking for. So I'm more of a go big or go home, take the one Super Bowl and suck for the rest of my life. I'd die happy. But Brad Holmes has a different job. He's got a job to look at winning now and in the future. And so I think right now you give him credit, one step at a time. And it's not to say that we could be wrong and he could build a winner. You could build a team like the Buccaneers with, their early runs, or like teams that won the Super Bowl with a Jeff Hostetler, or the Ravens, who got a couple opportunities but weren't dynastic. I dream big. So I'm like, get the baddest man on the planet and wins 5 Super Bowls. So to get a couple playoff runs would be great. And who's to say that they're not thinking that way? I think they might be aggressive and find a quarterback in this year's draft, and maybe that person will end up being the starter. But right now, the good thing is that the Lions are building towards something. And I'm talking about the end result here. And what I'm taking away is that there's a lot of positive hope that the Lions are doing things that good football teams do. Build in the trenches, have nice talent, have inexpensive talent on rookie deals. And it tells me when I see the Super Bowl odds and I see NFC odds and the Lions are top 10 in betting odds and Vegas is liking the Lions to potentially get to the NFC title game and maybe even win it, I like what I'm seeing in that the Lions are being built in a way that allows us to talk about them being competitive. Where, if you recall on Twitter at Detroit Podcast, 7 years ago, we were screaming at Jim Caldwell because he wouldn't defend the Lions, and they were getting screwed. And they kept losing to bad teams. And they kept losing to the good teams. They could defeat the crumb bums of the NFL, but they kept getting defeated by teams that were better than them. This team is built different, and I'm seeing a wave of positivity that is going to be off the charts over the next few months. So I think fans should buy it. I think fans should buy that this team can be a winner. Now, I think that you shouldn't spend any money that they're going to win the Super Bowl. That's outlandish. You need to see playoff wins.
But they're in the top 10. Odds have them as a top 10 team going into next year.
I know, it's crazy because it's good because they can be that team. You can see they went 8-2 because 8-2 is not easy to do. So they have a chance to do it if they nail this draft, if they nail draft and free agency, get 4 more players that can compete and play well, we're talking playoff wins. We're talking NFC titles. So that's why I'm buying it. I'm not going to put no money down that they're going to win the Super Bowl, but I would put some money down that they could win the NFC North.
Yeah, I definitely see them winning the NFC North. I think right now, if you look at just the NFC North, right? Green Bay, there's a lot of speculation that Aaron Rodgers is gone. Also, that team hasn't been very good for a while. Look, Devontae Adams gone. You've seen how that offense took steps back. Aaron Rodgers might be gone. That offense will definitely take steps back. You look at Minnesota. I don't know about you, but I really don't trust Kirk Cousins. I really feel like Kirk Cousins is Mr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Yeah, they've got a great wide receiver, and yeah, they got a really good running back, but that defense was absolutely porous, worse than your defense. You took advantage of it multiple times, and I just don't believe in what is going on with Minnesota. I feel like Minnesota, their window is closing, and it's almost shut. They're going to have to do something. They're going to have to either find a new quarterback or they're going to have to invest very heavily in that defensive side of the ball. And now you look at the Bears. I don't really know what the Bears are at this point. I don't know what the Bears want to be. It sounds like they're not completely sold on their quarterback, which makes things really difficult. Defensively, they weren't very good. Offensively, it really feels like they've got to shuffle the deck and they've got to get rid of a lot of players and basically reload. The Bears really feel like they are maybe 2-3 years away from really being in competition. So that puts your Detroit Lions at the forefront. Got a really good offensive line. You've got weapons on the outside. You've got a veteran quarterback who's been there, done that, and gotten to a Super Bowl. Defensively, you were vastly improved over the last 10 games compared to the first 7 games. You took monster steps forward. Your number one draft pick, number 2 overall, was incredibly impactful, so much so that he was in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. You have a linebacker that you got in the 6th round who looks to show a lot of promise and could be a little bit of a game wrecker. Jeff Okudah, a guy who I have bagged on for years, took steps forward, took a couple steps back, took some steps forward. I think you've got to really figure out what you have there. I think in your safety position, I think with Tracy Walker coming back and what you have with Kirby Joseph, I think you've got a real strength there. I think you've got 2 dudes who can play. And if you want to bring back anybody you want, or you want to go out and find another impactful safety to put him in there, cool. I think you've got some strength there at the safety position. I think you really need to address parts of that defensive line, and I think you need to address that linebacking core, and you need to add another corner to this team, whether you do it through free agency or the draft. I think you need to do those things, and having a coordinator like Aaron Glenn, I think helps a ton. Having that familiarity and having the creativeness and the willingness to be flexible, to put guys in position to help you win. I think this bodes well for the Detroit Lions, and I think that they win the NFC North. Actually, I know they're going to win the NFC North next year. I'm just going to put it out there right now. The Detroit Lions win the NFC North next season, and I think they are hosting a playoff game.
Yeah.
And I think they make it to the 2nd round. Look, I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl, all right? And I think those odds are awesome. But I think they've got enough cachet built up over the last 2 seasons, right? Not so much what they did that first part of the Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell season. But that second part of that season when they went on a little bit of a stretch, which gave us a lot of hope going into last year, and which is why we got so frustrated when things just weren't going well those first couple of games. But what they've done at the back end, like going 8-2, like you said, that's not easy, man. That is hard to do. Like reeling off 8 wins out of 10 is tough, man. And this was a team that played against teams that had playoffs in their eyesight. Playoffs is what they were striving for. You beat a team like the Giants. You beat a team like Green Bay, who had everything to play for. You went toe-to-toe with a team that was supposed to win the Super Bowl in the Bills, and you lost on some questionable play calls from your head coach. So you can clean those things up. I think this team dominates the North, and I think this team is making a push towards the Super Bowl, but I don't think they win it next year. So I buy parts of it. But I do think it's important, especially with those Super Bowl odds, that a guy like Aaron Glenn comes back and you keep a guy like Ben Johnson. And I think both of us agree Ben Johnson is probably the bigger piece that you needed to keep because that offense was so good and he did such a great job transforming that offense and getting guys involved that you were like, who's that guy? Where did he come from? But I think what you've seen Aaron Glenn do with that defense towards the back half of the season has to give you a lot of hope. And I think having both of those coordinators come back, I think is a super steal for the Detroit Lions. And I think it helps boost those Super Bowl odds of them getting in and wreaking havoc in the playoffs and possibly playing for the Super Bowl. How important do you think it was for a guy like Aaron Glenn to come back, not get picked up by a team like the Colts or get picked up by a team like the Arizona Cardinals? Instead, he's coming back as your defensive coordinator next year.
Yeah, very well. Very good. Very uplifting news that the Lions' main coaches, main assistants are coming back. Yeah, there's going to be some turnover. Obviously, you lost Deuce Staley, you're adding Dre Bly. So there's going to be some naturally every year. When you're a good football team, other teams are going to want to poach and advance the assistants. That's what you should be. That should be a great goal. Could you imagine, cuz the Dan Campbell tree? That's unheard of. The Dan Campbell coaching tree sprinkled across the league and all the great storylines that could emerge. That's what you're trying to do. That's why having a great general manager and a great head coach really allows things to continue, because you probably could assume that Andy Reid will have a great time if his offensive coordinator ends up leaving. If Eric Bieniemy gets an opportunity in a year or two, I think people will still be confident that Andy Reid knows what's going on. So it's great news, man. It's great that the band is getting back together. I think that it's going to be great. Can we fast forward to March 15th so we can see how, because I know we all are loving the draft talk and things like that, but just to add a layer of context, once the free agent strategy is clear, which will be a month and a half before the draft, you'll get a much better picture as to what the team is valuing in free agency, because then it'll put into focus what they're going to do in the draft. So I want to see how much of a splash does Brad Holmes make? Who does he invest in? Who does he let go? But I'm very happy with the coaches and what they can do. I mean, Jesus, it's going to be fun to get out there to watch the Lions offense and for them to be able to take the next step. Oh my gosh. And you're going to finally see Jameson Williams work with Jared Goff and be part of that offense. And he'll be integrated a lot more. And you'll see Amon-Ra St. Brown get better. And you'll see improvements. I think everything's on the right track. Remember, guys, when we talk about concerns, we're not hating on the Lions. Adam and I have been doing this, we're watching football for 3 decades. So our focus when we look at big picture is, what does these moves mean for the Lions winning the Super Bowl? Okay, that's where we go to right away. Adam and I don't do things to just be like, well, how can they get to the playoffs and lose and win a couple games? We already expect that because that's where they already should be. Like, they're way behind the 8 ball. Like, we're talking, when we're talking through our football, we're talking, and I think always to put that out there, when we've talked about Stafford, we weren't talking about, hey, is he a quarterback you could win a couple playoff games with? We were always examining, could you win a Super Bowl in Detroit with Stafford? It didn't end up happening. So that's why we always talk about that. And yeah, are they building in the right way? Yes. Do I expect to cover a playoff game? Yes. Do I expect improvements? Yes. Am I confident they're a Super Bowl caliber team? No. And that's where my passion comes in. I don't get passionate about talking about, hey, can the team get to the playoffs? That's the floor. That's the part I expect every couple years. So that's where the disconnect comes in with fans that are always like, oh, you're a hater. I'm not a hater. I come in with the context of how does this help us win the Super Bowl, championship, hoist the big trophy, the biggest prize, the biggest goal, the biggest celebration. I don't care in regards to the nitpicking of what do they do to make the postseason. But the team's building well. This looks good. This looks like it can happen. But I want the sexiness. I need the quarterback. I need the guy. I need the juice. And Goff can be serviceable. But remember, in cold weather games and defensive coordinators that have their shit together are going to blitz the shit out of them. And there's going to be propensities for mistakes. So let's see. Maybe we can expect Goff to improve in the next 12 months. I love to see it. Maybe with an elite running back, with one more badass receiver, and some cornerbacks that can make some plays, we can be talking about some supreme goals as we move through the 2023 season, man. It's good times, man. It's good times to talk football. This broadcast was fun to talk about, kind of let off some steam and let everybody know where the Lions are at. And we're going to talk about it. Free agents, the draft, speculation, rumors. Maybe Brad Holmes should take the stab at the quarterback. Maybe he should take the stab at the offense. We'll talk about all of that because when you see what we saw in the Super Bowl, now you can kind of extrapolate how the Lions can build and copy what good teams do. And the Lions are on track, baby. They're on track. Let's see how these moves progress in the future. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you've agreed or disagreed, give us your take. It's welcome at Detroit Podcast. Thank you guys for your support. Thank you for engaging in a debate regarding whether some dude busting his TV was real or fake. Over 100,000 people saw that and are interested in that. And, that has a little bit of wrestling to it, and it's great to be able to explore that. And it's fun. If you agree or anything, let us know. We like to debate. You don't have to agree with us. Adam and I can stand up for ourselves and debate everything in the world of sports. So thank you for your engagement, all your support over the years. It's fun to go down memory lane. So how do you go down memory lane? All you got to do is go to YouTube. Remember, those podcasts aren't live. We just throw them there to live for free. You just type in Detroit Sports Podcast on YouTube. All the thousands of podcasts are there. You can time it out to when the Lions would lose with Caldwell or with the Patricia era or back in the day when they were in 2014. We were covering it all, so you can go back and enjoy some old audio content. Make sure, everybody, type in Detroit Sports Podcast anywhere you listen to your favorite audio content, and you can subscribe and enjoy our content. Thanks, cuz. This was very fun. 75 minutes of podcasting joy. I look forward to cranking it out next week as we inch ever so close to episode 500. Can't believe it, cuz. Have a good week, my man.